The quorum being present, the Committee on Homeland Security will come to order. The committee is meeting today for the consideration of H.R. 1887, which repeals the requirement from a previous appropriations bill to sell the DHS-owned Plum Island Animal Disease Center in Plum Island, New York. H.R. 4743, the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium Act of 2016, and H.R. 5056, the Airport Perimeter and Access Control Security Act of 2016. I now recognize myself for a very brief opening statement. The bills we mark up today will help to address some issues of importance affecting the operations of DHS security and the Transportation Security Administration. I believe there's a bipartisan agreement on these bills and the amendments, so I expect, if all goes well, that we will be able to move quickly through this process. That's my sincere hope. Does the ranking member like to comment on that?
On your hopes?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got high hopes right now.
All right. I'm in agreement.
The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased that today the committee is considering 3 bipartisan measures. I'm particularly pleased that H.R. 4743, the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium Act of 2016, and H.R. 5056, the Airport Perimeter Control Security Act of 2016 are being considered. To increase the availability of cybersecurity training and technical assistance to state, local, tribal, and territorial jurisdictions, we will be considering an amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4743 authored by Representative Richmond. It builds on the bipartisan measure introduced by the gentleman from Texas, Representative Castro, to not only recognize the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium, but also foster the proliferation of more university-based cybersecurity consortiums across the country. I commend the gentleman from Louisiana for introducing language in this amendment to promote participation on a diverse range of academic institutions, including historically black colleges and universities and other minority-serving institutions. The other measure I'd like to acknowledge is H.R. 5056. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of this bill, which was authored by Representative Keating. It gives effect to recommendations to bolster perimeter security at our nation's airports that were the product of a report that Mr. Keating, Mr. Richmond, and myself requested back in 2014. Since joining the committee, Mr. Keating has been a leader on the issue of airport perimeter security, and I commend him for staying the course on this difficult Homeland Security challenge. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. By agreement between the chair and ranking member, the committee plans to make this a quick markup. That's, again, my hope, by adopting and reporting the bills by unanimous consent.
Mr. Chairman.
The ranking member is recognized.
Reserving the right to object, and I will not object, would the chair please explain our agreement regarding the unanimous consent request? I yield to the chairman. I
thank the gentleman and all committee members for agreeing to the use of unanimous consent to call up and report the bills. We've agreed to call up the bills en bloc, H.R. 1887, H.R. 4743, and H.R. 5056, and adopt the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1887 and the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4743, along with 2 amendments on the roster to H.R. 4743, and then report all 3 bills to the House with a favorable recommendation. Before that UC request is made, I plan to recognize the members offering the bills or the ANS to the bills and any other members who wish to speak on the bills or the amendments.
I thank the chair for his explanation and withdraw my reservation.
I thank the ranking member. I now call up H.R. 1887, which repeals the requirement from a previous appropriations bill to sell the DHS-owned Plum Island Animal Disease Center in Plum Island, New York. H.R. 4743, the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium Act of 2016, and H.R. 5056, the Airport Perimeter and Access Control Security Act of 2016, and ask unanimous consent that the subcommittees on cybersecurity, infrastructure protection, and security technologies be discharged from consideration of H.R. 1887 and H.R. 4743, and that all three bills be considered en bloc. And without objection, so ordered. The bills were circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bills.
H.R. 1887, to amend certain appropriation acts to repeal the requirement directing the Administrator of General Services to sell federal property and assets that support the operations of the Plum Island Animal Disease Center in Plum Island, New York, and for other purposes. H.R. 4743, to authorize the Secretary of Homeland Security to establish a national cybersecurity preparedness consortium and for other purposes. H.R. 5056, to modernize and enhance airport perimeter and access control security by requiring updated risk assessments and the development of security strategies and for other purposes.
And without objection, the first reading is dispensed with and the bills are considered read and open to amendment at any point. Mr. Donovan is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1887.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment in the nature of a substitute updates H.R. 1887, sponsored by Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York. This legislation has the bipartisan support of the members of the Connecticut and New York delegations, including myself. Moving this bill forward, with the changes made in the ANS, is an essential step in the effort to preserve Plum Island for future generations for the purposes of conservation, education, and research. Since 1954, the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate's Plum Island Animal Disease Center has served as a form of defense against accidental or intentional introduction of foreign animal diseases, including foot and mouth disease. In 2005, DHS announced that the research and development conducted at Plum Island will be moved to a new federal facility in Kansas. A law was then enacted that called for the sale of Plum Island. The traditional intra-agency consultation process regarding the disposal of federal property was bypassed. The amendment in the nature of a substitute suspends the sale of Plum Island until a thorough review of all of the possible alternatives for the disposition of the island have been conducted. These include the transfer of the property to another federal agency, the state or local government, a not-for-profit, or a combination thereof. The ANS includes nature to ensure any potential cleanup costs, hazardous mitigation, and environmental safety concerns associated with the scheduled closure of Plum Island are also studied. This amendment also ensures that any effort in the House align with those underway in the Senate. Not only is this effort about protecting the historical, ecological, and scientific significant island, it is also about protecting local control. The public and lawmakers at all levels of government on both sides of the Long Island Sound have spoken out loud and clear that they do not want to see this island sold for private development. The town of South Hold, New York, which has zoning jurisdiction over Plum Island, went as far as preempting any private development by zoning this island strictly for conservation or scientific research purposes. This is an essential effort for our entire region that will help protect wildlife and the significant taxpayer investment already made in the world-class laboratory and research facilities located on Plum Island. This ANS is an important step forward to address these concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman, yield for 30 seconds.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. I just want to commend Mr. Donovan and Mr. Zeldin for their work on this, and Ms. Rice and I are in full agreement with this. It's important for the people of Long Island and for the entire region. I yield back to the gentleman.
Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time, Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond, is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4347.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As an original co-sponsor of H.R. 4743, I am pleased to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute for this measure, authored by Mr. Castro of Texas, that seeks to bolster the Department of Homeland Security's ability to address cybersecurity risk at state, local, tribal, and territorial level, particularly for emergency responders. My amendment, like the underlying bill, recognizes that consortiums of institutions of higher learning are uniquely qualified to raise the level of cybersecurity across our nation. Specifically, my amendment authorizes DHS to work with consortiums to develop and create opportunities for cybersecurity training and assistance programs for state and local first responders. The inspiration for this bill was the important work being done by the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium, a consortium led by the University of Texas San Antonio and the Texas Engineering Extension Service in the Texas A&M University system.
The NCPC, which includes the University of Arkansas Criminal Justice Institute, Memphis State University, and Norfolk University in Vermont, evaluates community cybersecurity postures and provides them with a roadmap to correct deficiencies. While this consortium is making an important contribution in helping raise the level of cybersecurity around the nation, the need for cybersecurity training and technical assistance is enormous. In fact, in a 2015 survey entitled State of Cybersecurity in Local, State, and Federal Government, state and local organizations describe their cybersecurity programs as being in the early and middle stages of maturity, and 86% of state and local respondents identified managing cybersecurity risk as one of their most stressful jobs. My amendment requires DHS to look to and seek out consortiums like the one I just described to provide high-quality, research-based cybersecurity-related training, exercises, and technical assistance to local jurisdictions, counties, states, and small businesses on Main Street. My amendment also requires DHS to take a broad look at the diversity of institutions that can help deliver cybersecurity training on a national scope. While one or more members of the consortium I described as currently in a minority-serving institution, my amendment requires that the Secretary to conduct outreach to additional universities and colleges, including historically black colleges and universities, Hispanic-serving institutions, tribal colleges and universities, and other minority-serving institutions regarding opportunities to support these cybersecurity training and assistance efforts. Mr. Chairman, this is a good bill, and my amendment approves it in a positive, bipartisan fashion. I encourage all my colleagues to support the amendment, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. It's a good bill, and I certainly appreciate the bipartisan nature of it. The gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating, is recognized for 5 minutes on his bill, H.R. 5056.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, my mother, at the age I could first understand what she was talking about, I remember used to just tell me I had a one-track mind. And I think the chairman of the Transportation Security Subcommittee and the ranking member would agree with that. I don't think there was a hearing on aviation security where I didn't bring this issue up, but it's an important one. And I want to thank the chairman, ranking member of that subcommittee for joining me with this. I want to thank the ranking member Thompson, Reps King, Reps Richmond, Swalwell, and Torres for their help as well. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, last year the Associated Press revealed that there had been at least 268 perimeter breaches at 31 major U.S. airports, and the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, has calculated a total of 1,300 perimeter security breaches at 450 domestic airports just from 2001 to 2011. But that figure does not account for the continued perimeter security breaches since 2011, including stowaways, including young boys, trespassing across tarmacs, scaling of perimeter fences, and driving vehicles through barriers and across airport property. We've seen many of those things witnessed on video on national television. As I've often said, we're lucky that these individuals did not harbor nefarious intentions, but that does not mitigate the risk posed by such behavior to airports, to their employees, and of course, to passengers and travelers who rely on TSA officers and airport operators for their security. This bill is a long time coming. As many of you know, since I was first elected, I've worked hard on this issue. In 2014, I, along with Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Richmond, and Swalwell, requested an independent review of TSA's airport security policies by the General Accountability Office. While GAO found that TSA has made progress in assessing the threat, vulnerability, and consequences, components of the risk to the airport perimeter and access control security, TSA has not taken into consideration the changes in airport security environments, such as the TSA's subsequent determination of the risk of inside threats. Updating the risk assessment of airport security with information that reflects the current threat would better ensure that TSA bases its risk management decisions on current information and focuses its limited resources on the highest priority risk to airport security. Further, GAO found that TSA has not comprehensively assessed the vulnerability of TSA-regulated commercial airports and systems system-wide through its Joint Vulnerability Assessment, which it conducts with the FBI. In fact, from 2009 to 2015, TSA conducted JVAs at only 81 of 437 commercial airports nationwide, or 19%. This legislation, Airport Security and Access Control Act, will codify the recommendations from this GAO report. Specifically, it requires TSA to update transportation security sector assessment for the aviation sector, update comprehensive risk assessment of perimeter and access control security with the most available intelligence, and determine a process for the future going forward. Regular updates and conduct through an assessment of perimeters and access control points will have to be made. Included in the assessments will be updates reflected in GVA findings, changes in risk environments to the airports, the unique geography of and current best practices used by airports, and equally important, input from airport operators. Finally, this bill requires TSA to develop a strategy for future comprehensive updates to airport security assessments. I thank you for all your support, so many members of this committee, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized to discuss the bill or amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Katko is recognized.
Thank you. I just want to commend Mr. Keating for his dogged determination. We kidded him a bit during the hearings a lot because he was so focused on this. It's a very righteous issue and it's a very important issue. And the only concern I have going forward is what you're going to do with the hearings going forward when this is now passed. So with that, I yield back.
Any other members wish to be recognized? Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak briefly in support of H.R. 4743, the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium Act of 2016. As we all know, state and local communities often do not possess the same digital resources as the federal government. States and communities need the ability to detect, respond to, and recover from cyber events just as they would any other disaster or emergency situation. And as already been mentioned here, a handful of universities have been leading in the way of the area of cyber preparedness, including the University of Texas at San Antonio and Texas A&M University. Building upon their great work with this authorization will be crucial to protecting digital infrastructure at the state and local level and ensuring that our first responders and government entities are adequately prepared for a significant cyber event. I firmly support the idea of a national cybersecurity preparedness consortium and appreciate my colleagues' diligent work on this issue. I yield back.
Any other members wish to be recognized? Chair is not aware of any other amendments. Therefore, without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1887 is adopted. The amendments on the roster offered by Ms. Jackson Lee to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4743 are adopted. The amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4743 as amended is adopted. And the committee orders H.R. 1887 and H.R. 4743 to be reported to the House as amended with a favorable recommendation, and the committee adopts and orders H.R. 5056 to be reported to the House without amendment with a favorable recommendation, and staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to H.R. 1887 and H.R. 4743. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. This concludes consideration of the bills noticed by the committee for today.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to
Mr. King is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Rule 22, Clause 1 of the Rules of the House, I move the committee authorize the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to go to conference with the Senate on the bills ordered, reported by this committee today, or on similar Senate bills.
Without objection, the motion is agreed to. Ranking member is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2L, I ask that members have 2 calendar days to file with the clerk of the committee supplemental, additional, or minority views on each of the bills ordered reported by the committee today.
Without objection, so ordered. Let me just thank both the staff on both sides of the aisle and the members for this successful markup. This is certainly the way I like to conduct the business of the committee. There being no further business to transact, the committee now stands adjourned.